The news now on BBC One with Sophie Raworth.
Tonight at 10, the Vatican says the Pope died this morning after a stroke and heart failure. He was 88. He died just hours after his last public appearance, blessing the crowds on Easter Sunday in St. Peter's Square. Large crowds returned this evening for a prayer service at the Vatican. And tonight, as is tradition, the Pope's personal residence was locked and sealed after his body had been laid in a chapel. The cardinals will meet tomorrow and begin plans for the Pope's funeral, which could be as soon as Friday. Also on the programme, President Trump defends his Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, after fresh reports that he shared sensitive military information in another group chat, this time involving his wife and brother. And ecstatic Burnley celebrate their promotion to the Premier League as Leeds move up as well. Good evening. Millions of Catholics around the world are in mourning after the death of Pope Francis from a stroke and heart failure. He was 88. The Vatican announced that the Pope died at 7:35 this morning, less than 24 hours after he was last seen in public blessing the Easter crowds. The Pope's body is now lying in a chapel in Vatican City. His funeral would normally be held 4 to 6 days after his death, so possibly as soon as this weekend. The US President Donald Trump has already said tonight that he will be attending. Pope Francis was last seen in public just yesterday, appearing on the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square to bless thousands of worshippers who had gathered there to see him on Easter Sunday. He was the leader of more than 1 billion Catholics, and tributes have been paid from all around the world. We'll look back at his life and we'll look ahead at the next days and weeks as preparations are made for his funeral and then the election of his successor. Our first report is from Rupert Wingfield-Hayes at the Vatican.
An Easter Monday in the Vatican that no one could have anticipated. Pilgrims flocking to the Vatican to be greeted by the news of the death of a pope. Just after 10 had come this shocking announcement.
Alle ore 7:35.
At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his Church. He taught us to live the values of the Gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially toward the poorest and most marginalized.
Across Rome, the bells of every church began to ring out. A solemn salute and a message to the people of Rome that the Pope had died. In St. Peter's Square, the news spread fast, bringing shock and sadness.
I was sort of really shocked because I was here yesterday at Mass and I saw the Pope and he looked just so fragile, you know.
Also sad considering that he's been a very energetic Pope. I have really appreciated the reforms that he has brought into the church, his leadership style, the synodal leadership style. I think he's been a great Pope.
It's a great disappointment, a great loss. A man who has innovated the church and a man who has left a great mark. And this, his absence, causes great pain.
You can see that when we ask people here what Pope Francis meant to them, you hear the same words coming up over and over. They speak of his humanity, of his warmth, and of his moral leadership. Wherever he went around the world, he was greeted with tremendous enthusiasm, just as he was here in St. Peter's Square yesterday, in his very last public appearance. On Sunday morning, a clearly frail Pope Francis had greeted cheering crowds of Easter worshippers from the balcony of St. Peter's. In a very thin voice, he gave this final Easter greeting.
Buona Pasqua.
It has now been confirmed he died after suffering a stroke and heart failure. Only weeks before, he had been discharged from hospital after suffering double pneumonia. It's clear Pope Francis was determined to be in St. Peter's Square to celebrate Easter yesterday. But as he was driven around in his Pope-mobile, he looked frail and exhausted. Tonight, the Pope's official residence was sealed. Outside, thousands gathered to pray for him. Soon they will be joined by the great and the good from across the world to attend his funeral, including, we are told, President Donald Trump. But for those here, there is simply gratitude for the man he was and the job he did in leading their church. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News, in Rome.
Well, our religion editor, Aleem Maqbool, is at the Vatican. And Aleem, you've been talking to some of the people who've gathered there this evening, and we've also been learning more details tonight about the Pope's last wishes.
Yes, of course, thousands of people streamed into St. Peter's Square during the day. They knew, of course, he was elderly. They knew, of course, that he had a very complex health picture. But the reason a lot of them are feeling so much shock is because they saw him just yesterday among them and seemingly getting better. Well, now we know that he suffered a stroke and a heart attack. But a lot of those people now feel privileged to have seen him for the final time in a public event like the Mass yesterday, and feel privileged to be a part of all of this. And yes, the Pope, we now know, left final words, a final testament to be read out, and it was published this evening. In it, he talks about the way he wanted to be buried, very simply, with a tombstone that just says his name, Francis, in a church, not St. Peter's Basilica behind me. But part of his message was also to some of those who've been here and who've been praying for him today. And this is how he ended that testament. He said, "May the Lord grant a fitting reward to all those who've loved me and who continue to pray for me. The suffering that has marked the final part of my life, I offer to the Lord, for peace in the world and for fraternity among peoples." And that message at the end is very much in keeping with one of the legacies of Pope Francis' papacy. Yes, he spoke out for the marginalised, but he was also vehemently anti-war. I've been taking a look at Pope Francis' life and his hugely consequential papacy. His surprise election in 2013 would mark a more radical break with the past than many expected. Jorge Bergoglio did have Italian roots, but was born in Argentina. While studying for priesthood, he worked briefly as a nightclub bouncer. As Pope, he greeted his flock, having taken the name of a saint who championed the cause of the poor. His style was informal, even when conducting ceremonies, and his first act as Pope was to pay his own hotel bill. In his early gestures, like washing the feet of the elderly and prisoners, he showed desire for his priests to be closer to the disadvantaged. He spoke out for the protection of migrants and refugees, laying a wreath on the waters where so many died on their perilous journeys. He linked economic inequality to the environment. In a video launching a papal encyclical, he said climate change amounted to rich countries inflicting damage on poor ones. He travelled widely, drawing energy from the crowds. In Brazil, 3 million gathered on Copacabana Beach.
The Pope of the Holy See!
In 2015, he became the first Pope to address the US Congress.
I am most grateful for your invitation,
telling the world's richest nation to take care of Mother Earth.
God bless America.
He apologized for the scandal of sexual abuse of children by priests. His words here spoken by a translator.
God weeps for the sexual abuse of children.
On a visit to Ireland, the first by a pope in almost 40 years, he apologised to victims at almost every event, but scandals continued to emerge. His papacy marked something of a change of tone on the subject of homosexuality, early on remarking, "Who am I to judge?" when talking about a gay bishop. But some progressives argue that in practical terms, the Vatican's stance and the Church's teachings have changed little. Even so, conservative Catholics viewed him with suspicion. But in some ways, he was as traditional as Pope John Paul II, whom he made a saint. And he had very conservative views on abortion, contraception, surrogacy, and gender reassignment. His style of papacy, though, couldn't have been more different to his immediate predecessor, Benedict XVI, whose funeral he presided over. Through the scores of cardinals from the developing world he appointed, he changed the complexion of the church hierarchy, consolidating a shift in the centre of gravity of Catholicism away from Europe, where it was in decline, toward Latin America, Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. In recent years, Pope Francis was beset by health issues, most noticeably affecting his mobility, but he found it hard to pare down his busy schedule.
Buona domenica a tutti.
He was, above all, a pastoral pope, a man of humility who preferred the fellowship of ordinary believers to the trappings of ecclesiastical status and power.
Aline McBull. Throughout the day, tributes have been paid from all around the world. King Charles, one of the last people to meet the Pope during a visit to Rome 2 weeks ago, said His Holiness will be remembered for his compassion, his concern for the unity of the Church, and for his tireless commitment to the common causes of all people of faith. The flag above Buckingham Palace has been lowered to half-mast. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, said Pope Francis was a pope for the poor, the downtrodden and the forgotten. He never lost hope for a better world. In the US, President Trump ordered flags at the White House and on government buildings to be lowered. He paid tribute to the Pope during an Easter egg hunt in Washington, appearing on a balcony with his wife and a giant rabbit.
He was a good man, worked hard. He loved the world, and it's an honor to do that.
President Macron spoke of the pain felt by many.
Des plus vulnérables, des plus fragiles.
He's been at the side of the most vulnerable and fragile, with a great deal of humility and a very special sense of humanity in these times of war and brutality.
Thousands of Catholics across the world have been attending special church masses to mark the death of the Pope. Our World News correspondent Joe Inwood reports.
In Buenos Aires, Catholics have lost more than just their spiritual leader. Some have lost a man they considered a friend. Maria says she met Pope Francis at a moment of greatest need.
Today feels like a day of mourning. To me, Pope Francis became family from the moment I met him. All I ask now is that he may rest in peace.
News of Pope Francis' death broke overnight in his native Argentina, but within hours, Mass was being held at the cathedral he once presided over.
I believe he made a great effort to make it to Easter, which is the great celebration for Christians. What gives Christianity its meaning is the resurrection.
That was a message repeated at special services held all around the world. In the Philippines, home to one of the world's biggest Catholic populations, his humility was a source of inspiration.
When he became Pope, we are all awed by how humble he was, and he continued humble throughout his ministry.
He was the first Pope to have come from the Southern Hemisphere, the first non-European for hundreds of years. In India, they celebrated the life of a man who preached poverty and practiced what he preached. In Nigeria, it was a moment for celebration as much as sorrow.
We say thanks be to God because dying during the moments of the resurrection of Jesus gives on a good feeling that he has, as the apostles were asked to go to meet Jesus in Galilee, he has been asked to come home to meet Jesus.
While in New York, his life was described with the words of St. Paul.
I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I kept the faith. Boy, did he. He really fought the good fight.
Grant that your departed servant Pope Francis...
At Westminster Cathedral, a Requiem Mass celebrated the life of Pope Francis. around the UK special services were held. The Bishop of Armagh led prayers at St Patrick's Roman Catholic Cathedral. People arrived throughout the day in Cardiff to pay their respects. And in Scotland, people gathered at St Andrew's Cathedral in Glasgow. For the world's Catholics, it has been a day of sorrow, but also of appreciation for the life of a pope unlike any other. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Well, this is what will happen over the next few days as Catholics around the world say farewell to the Pope. Tonight, Pope Francis's body rests in a chapel at his St Martha residence. He will be moved to St Peter's Basilica to lie in state as early as Wednesday. The Pope's funeral is traditionally held within 4 to 6 days of his death, with the funeral mass taking place in St Peter's Square. Pope Francis's death has now set in motion the conclave, which is the political process for the Church to select a new leader. The vote, which is held in the Sistine Chapel, usually takes place 15 to 20 days after the Pope's death. Mark Easton reports.
Pope Francis believed the Catholic Church should be a universal home where everyone was welcome. That was one of the messages from the priests at Westminster Cathedral this afternoon, where worshippers came to pray for a man who hoped to simplify the philosophy of his church.
So one of his quotes that I remember was, "If you want to know how successful your economy is, ask an unemployed person." He wanted us to look at things, as it were, from the outside in and not from the inside out. And in that sense, his desire to uphold and promote the cause of those on the margins was also a critique.
The Pope's office and apartments have been sealed. The papal fisherman's ring has been removed from Pope Francis's finger and smashed with a hammer. His body, dressed in red robes, will lie in state for 3 days. Ritual dictates almost every detail of a pope's death. But Pope Francis was a man with his own ideas. He has elected not to be buried in the Vatican, like most of his predecessors, but in the Basilica of St Mary Major, where he often chose to pray. It is in one of Rome's less glamorous neighbourhoods, Esquilino, home to budget hotels and modest B&Bs, close to the main bus and railway stations, the district where many immigrants have put down roots. Unlike the grand and traditional papal funeral afforded to Pope Benedict in 2023, Francis has designed a much humbler service. Rather than the grand 3-layered papal coffin, his will be a simple wooden casket. The funeral will take place within a week, amid 9 days of official mourning. Almost 80% of the cardinals who will elect Pope Francis's successor were chosen by him. His appointments have ensured it's a much less European constituency than before, with 18 South American and 18 African cardinals. The name that prompts the white smoke announcing the conclave has chosen the new Supreme Pontiff may well be a surprise.
He's not followed the tradition of major cities automatically having a cardinal at their head. But he's chosen auxiliary bishops, he's chosen a man he met once in Russia. He's just made his picks, and that will remain, I'm sure.
Pope Francis will almost certainly have prayed that his vision for Catholicism might survive his death, a church less Roman and more Catholic, less focused on Europe and more on its global, diverse congregation.
We commend to God the soul of our beloved Pope Francis.
But for the 7 million Catholics in the UK, this is a time to mourn and to pray. The intrigues of the conclave are for another day. Mark Easton, BBC News.
Let's go back now to Aline McBroad in Vatican City and tell us more about what is happening in the next few days.
Well, as we've heard, it will be a laying in state in a couple of days' time, the funeral later in the week, and then in a couple of weeks' time, as we heard there, the conclave, and Pope Francis' influence is all over that. For the first time, it'll be a conclave of where more than half of the cardinal electors, as they're called, are non-Europeans. But of course his legacy is much more than that. That's why a lot of the tributes pouring in from every corner of the world are not just from sovereigns or heads of state, They're from people who felt that he spoke for them, the marginalised, and from people of all faiths and none as well.
Aline Mabul in Vatican City. Thank you. Let's look at some of the day's other news now. And Ukraine's military has reported Russian drone attacks on several regions just hours after an Easter truce ended. Russia declared the 30-hour truce on Saturday, but fighting continued on parts of the front line. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, today spoke to President Zelensky, supporting Ukraine's calls for a full Russian ceasefire. There will be further talks this week between the UK, US, German, French and Ukrainian officials. The White House says President Trump stands strongly behind his Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, after fresh reports emerged that he had shared sensitive information about airstrikes on Yemen in a second group chat that included his wife, brother and personal lawyer. The New York Times reported that Pete Hegseth created a group called Defense Team Huddle. Senior Democrats have called for him to be removed from his position. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, is in Washington. How much trouble is Pete Hegseth in?
Well, really quite a lot, because even though officials here at the White House are trying to dismiss this story as yet more fake news, it is piling the pressure on Pete Hegseth, because this is the second time he has been found to be sharing highly sensitive attack plans on a group chat on the Signal app. Because you may well remember there was a story last month about a separate group chat to which a journalist was mistakenly added, and he was able to see military plans in advance. And now we learn that Mr. Hegseth added his wife, his brother, his personal lawyer to a group that was able to see operational details that included the flight plans for the fighter jets that were attacking Houthi rebels in Yemen. Now, Pete Hegseth was asked about this himself today, and he lashed out at the press, but he didn't actually deny the story. Have a listen to this.
See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter.
Now, it is significant that there are Republicans in Congress as well as Democrats now calling for him to resign. He's always been a controversial figure, Pete Hegseth. He had to answer allegations of sexual abuse and excessive drinking before he could be confirmed in his post, and he doesn't have much experience. He's a former Fox News TV host. But Donald Trump said today he's got great confidence in him, that Pete Hegseth is doing a great job. But there have already been reports around here that President Trump is actually looking for a new defense secretary. Those are being dismissed by officials here, saying that's not true. But it's easy to imagine that Donald Trump will soon tire of having to constantly defend his defense secretary.
Sarah, thank you. 3 men have been charged with manslaughter after a woman died in a crash at a golf club in the West Midlands. Suzanne Cherry was hit by a van which was being chased by police near Sutton Coldfield early this month. She died in hospital 4 days later. In football, Burnley are returning to the Premier League after victory over Sheffield United. That result also confirmed Leeds' promotion after 2 years in the Championship. Patrick Geary was watching.
They're back. Burnley and Leeds return to the Premier League, worth hundreds of millions of pounds, yet priceless. It's where Burnley feel they belong, and they were determined not to let third-place Sheffield United get in their way. Josh Brownhill, the captain, led them nearer. Burnley have profited from their economy, 15 league goals conceded all season, so when Tom Cannon blasted Sheffield United level, Turf Moor was in shock. That was the detour, now for the trip. Hannibal Mabry brought down, Burnley penalty, Brownhill again, no pressure, no problem.
No messing about!
It was the goal that sent Burnley back to the elite, a year on from relegation, and the celebrations echoed across the Pennines. Because that meant Leeds United were up too. They'd done their bit earlier with incredible efficiency. Joel Pirou scored a hat-trick inside 20 minutes against Stoke City. He ended up with 4 and Leeds with 6. That took them to the brink of the big time. Now they had to wait for Burnley to confirm it. The jump to the Premier League's one of the biggest in world football, but right now these two clubs will feel they're weightless. Patrick Geary, BBC News.
Snow leopards are at risk of extinction, and scientists believe their population has declined by 20% in the past 2 decades. Now, conservationists in Pakistan are testing AI-powered cameras to try to save these beautiful big cats. Our Pakistan correspondent Azadeh Mashiri has been finding out how.
Beautiful, solitary, and in captivity. Today, all snow leopards are at risk. Conservationists are hoping technology could help save them. There are at least 300 snow leopards in Pakistan. We set off trying to understand what's being done to protect them.
Snow leopards are also called ghosts of the mountains because they're so hard to spot and therefore to count. Yet conservationists say tracking and documenting them is important because their survival is vital to our ecosystem.
By hunting ibex and blue sheep, snow leopards prevent overgrazing and protect mountain habitats. But sometimes they set their sights on villages and softer targets. Farmers hunt snow leopards in retaliation. So conservationists are trying to convince locals to spare them. Sitara lost all 6 of her sheep in one day.
And you haven't been able to replace those animals?
No, I don't have any money now. How can I buy them?
One AI project is trying to prevent these incidents from happening at all.
The camera is covered inside the box. It has its own lithium battery. The battery is also customized and custom made.
So how does it all work?
This is the early predatory warning system. And after years and using artificial intelligence, this camera can now tell if what's in front of it is an animal, a human, or even a snow leopard. The goal is to warn communities that a snow leopard is nearby so that they can move their livestock to safety.
The camera captures these images locally and then transfers them to a dashboard.
What's that one right there? That's me. Yeah, that's you. But I'm clearly a human being. Is it this?
But not everyone agrees technology can help. The villagers we spoke to choose to rely on each other.
So you've seen attacks. Was it scary?
She says no, not at all. When she's around, it's the snow leopard that runs.
You're the boss. Okay.
For now, the threat to snow leopards is still present. This one was orphaned. She's been in captivity for 12 years and doesn't know how to hunt.
She likes scratches.
Yeah.
Caretakers worry that if she's released, she'll go after livestock and become another casualty. Azadeh Mashiri, BBC News, Gilgit-Baltistan.
And finally, 10 years after 4-time British Olympian Paula Radcliffe retired from competitive racing, she was back today running the world-famous Boston Marathon. The 51-year-old crossed the line in 2 hours and 53 minutes, wearing the race number 215 in honour of her world record time back in 2003. She was cheered on by her son and her daughter. It was the first time she'd run Boston, and completing it meant that she was finally awarded her 6-star medal for runners who finish all 6 of the World Marathon Majors: Tokyo, Boston, London, Berlin, Chicago and New York. Time for a look at the weather now. Elizabeth Rizzini is here. Hello.
Hello, thank you, Sophie. It's been quite a mixed picture weather-wise today. Some pretty lively showers, especially out towards the west at times. Longer spells of rain too. Some sunshine for good measure and lots of dry weather around as well. And it just stays unsettled, yes, but changeable as we head through the rest of the week. So it certainly won't be raining all the time. And perhaps good news too for our London Marathon on Sunday, of course. But a changeable week ahead. It's very April. And nothing out of the ordinary, certainly nothing spectacular temperature-wise either. They'll stay more or less at the seasonal average. So for tonight then, we've got this band of cloud and rain just clearing away from eastern Scotland there towards the Northern Isles. Elsewhere, clearing skies, the showers fading away, and it's a chillier start to the day on Tuesday than it was earlier on this morning. perhaps a touch of frost across Northern Ireland, but it's here where we'll be seeing wet weather by the time we get to the end of the day. But we're between weather systems generally, cloudy, really quite wet across the Northern Isles, but elsewhere a sunny start. We'll see more cloud bubble up, then some showers get going as we head into the afternoon. Temperatures generally 13 to 18, maybe 19 degrees Celsius towards the far south and the east, given a bit of sunshine. But look, the cloud thickens, the wind freshens, and there'll be some heavy rain across Northern Ireland by the time we get to the end of the day. And then that rain is set to swing eastwards across England and Wales as we head through Tuesday night. So it's good news for the parks and the gardens, where it's been so dry this spring. But it does stay dry across Scotland through the night, and there'll be some sunshine here through Wednesday morning. Still cloud and outbreaks of rain, it's legacy of that front. Across parts of East Anglia, that clears away. It's another day of sunshine and showers. Temperatures once again in the mid-teens, and that's where they'll tend to stay as we head through the rest of the week. Here's the outlook for our capital cities, but you can download the BBC Weather app and check the forecast for your local area online.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. And that is it from us on the day that Pope Francis has died. Good night.
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua.